Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we'll review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study, Masechet Gittin, pages 61 through 67. Samach Aleph, 61. If you give food, produce to your mother-in-law for her to prepare the food for you, the guy has to tithe that which he gives her and that which he receives back from her. Now, why should this be the case? I understand why he has to tithe that which he gives her, because you're not supposed to release untithed produce from your own hands. However, on the premise that what she's feeding him was the final cooked product of what he gave her, there should be no obligation to tithe the second time. So this seems to be redundant. Why does the law require it? The Gemara answers, "Bipnei shechashuda mitkalkel machlefet hamitkalkel." We suspect that the mother-in-law will substitute one food item for another food item, not wanting to give her son-in-law spoiled food or less than standard quality food. That a mother-in-law wants what's good for her daughter, and what's good for her daughter is to keep the daughter's husband happy, and she's embarrassed to put out a bad product to her son-in-law. So since she might switch one food item with another, it becomes necessary to tithe on the way in and on the way out. Samach Bet, 62. A person, a Jew, should not enter into the home of an idolater on the holiday of the idolaters in order to give greetings of shalom to that idolater. However, mitzao bashuk, if you find the idolater in the marketplace, in a public space, noten lo besafa rafa v'kovid rosh, you're allowed to give greetings on this Gentile holiday to that idolater in a soft language and with a serious frame of mind. In other words, not an over-the-top, how you doing, palling around type greeting, but rather something subdued, because it would be inappropriate to snub the guy completely, but you don't want to go over the top on the holiday of the pagans. Samach Gimel, 63. Ha'isha she'amra hitkabli li giti, if a woman says to a male agent of hers, an emissary, receive my get for me, tzricha shtei kitei edim, she'll need two sets of witnesses. Shnayim she'amru b'fanai amru, two witnesses who say, we saw her authorize this man to be the agent to receive her get. And two witnesses who say, we actually saw the delivery of the get. We saw the agent receive it and tear it. And it's possible for this to be not four different people, 2 plus 2, but rather the same two people who witnessed the authorization can also witness the reception of the get. So it need not be 4 people, it can be the same 2 people serving 2 different capacities. Samach Dalet, 64. Na'ara ma'orasa, a betrothed maiden, he ve'avia mekavanat gita. She can receive her get when she's in the status of Nara between 12 and 12 and a half, or her father can receive the get on her behalf. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, ein shtei yadayim zochos ka'achat. So Rabbi Yehuda rejects this idea that both him and her can receive the get. No, only one entity, one person, has the authority to receive the get. And that's the father, not the girl. And any woman who is too young or simply unable by incompetence to hold on to protect the physical copy of her get is not eligible to be divorced. Not eligible to be divorced. Samach Hey, 65. Haomer kitvu get tenu leishti. If a person were to say, write a get and give it to my wife, or gershua, divorce her, kitvu igeret tenula, or write an epistle and give it to her, so the authorized people should go ahead and write it. However, pitaruha, if he says, exempt her, parnasua, or provide for her, asula kanimo, so do according to her as is customary, asula karoila, or do what is appropriate for her, lo amar klum, that kind of verbiage doesn't mean anything, doesn't carry legal weight, and certainly does not mean that she's going to be divorced. So no authorization is given by the husband to his emissaries with that kind of a language. Samach Vav, 66. Habari shamar kitvu get lishti, ratzal sachekba. A healthy person who doesn't seem to be really interested in divorcing his wife, who tells others to write a get for her, is simply playing around with her, making a big mockery out of the whole thing, with no real intention to get divorced. Maaseh bebari echad, there was an incident involving a certain healthy man, She'amar kitvu get leishti, says, write a divorce document for my wife. Alala rosh hagag, and he went up to the top of the roof. V'nafal v'meis, and he fell off and died. Well, what do you do now? Was he just joking around about the get, or was he serious? So is this woman divorced or is she not? The Gemara says, Amar b'shem Gamliel, im me'atzmo nafal, if he fell off on his own, hare zeget, behold, this a valid get, meaning if it was a suicide or it looked like he did it because he wanted to die, and he had previously given her the divorce document, we assume it was a legitimate divorce. However, if it was a wind blew him off, and it looked like he had no intention to drop dead, but through circumstances beyond his control, he ended up dead, and get, then we presume that he wasn't serious about divorcing her previously, and the get document is invalid. Samach Zayin, 67. Nishtatek ve'amrulo, nichtov get lishtecha. What happens if a man became mute and he's unable to communicate verbally, and people went over to him and said, should we write a get for your wife? V'hirkin rosho, and he shook his head as if to indicate agreement with their instructions, or their desire for him to issue instructions. We'll check him 3 times, meaning there's a possibility we're misinterpreting that which he's quote-unquote saying, because he's not really saying anything. He's offering gestures as to indicate what he wants. So we'll check him 3 times. Amar al lav al hein. If we repeatedly check him and he says no about a no and a yes about a yes, so that we're confident that we know what he means, on the basis of that guidance, non-verbal guidance, these agents, these emissaries, will now go ahead and write the get document and deliver it to his wife, and she would thereby be divorced, despite the fact that he had never verbalized it because he's incapable of doing so, because he's an example of nishtate. Everyone have a great week.